Henrietta Maria of France. Born on the November 25, 1609, died on the September 10, 1669, was Queen of England, Scotland and Ireland from her marriage to King Charles I on June 13, 1625 until Charles was executed on January 30, 1649. She was mother of his sons Charles II and James II and VII. Contemporaneously, by a decree of her husband, she was known in England as Queen Mary, but she did not like this name and signed her letters Henriette R, or Henriette Marie R, the R standing for Regina, Latin for Queen. Henrietta Maria's Roman Catholicism made her unpopular in England, and also prohibited her from being crowned in a Church of England service. Therefore, she never had a coronation. She immersed herself in national affairs as civil war loomed, and in 1644, following the birth of her youngest daughter, Henrietta, during the height of the First English Civil War, was compelled to seek refuge in France. The execution of Charles I in 1649 left her impoverished. She settled in Paris and returned to England after the restoration of Charles II to the throne. In 1665, she moved back to Paris, where she died 4 years later. The North American province of Maryland, a major haven for Roman Catholic settlers, was named in honor of Queen Henrietta Maria. The name was carried over into the current U.S. state of Maryland. Henrietta Maria first met her future husband in 1623 at a court entertainment in Paris, when he was on his way to Spain with the Duke of Buckingham to discuss a possible marriage with Maria Anna of Spain. The proposal fell through when Philip IV of Spain demanded Charles convert to the Catholic Church and live in Spain for a year as preconditions for the marriage. As Philip was aware, such terms were unacceptable, and when Charles returned to England in October, he and Buckingham demanded King James declare war on Spain. Searching elsewhere for a bride, Charles sent his close friend Henry Rich, 1st Earl of Holland, to Paris in 1624. A Francophile and godson of Henry IV of France, Holland strongly favored a marriage with Henrietta Maria, the terms of which were negotiated by James Hay, 1st Earl of Carlisle. Henrietta Maria was aged 15 at the time of her marriage, which was not unusual for royal princesses of the period. Opinions on her appearance vary. Her niece Sophia of Hanover commented that the beautiful portraits of Van Dyck had given me such a fine idea of all the ladies of England that I was surprised to see that the Queen, who I had seen as so beautiful and lean, was a woman well past her prime. Her arms were long and lean, her shoulders uneven, and some of her teeth were coming out of her mouth like tusks. She did, however, have pretty eyes, nose, and a good complexion. A proxy marriage was held at Notre Dame de Paris on May 1, 1625, where Duke Claude of Chevreuse stood as proxy for Charles shortly after Charles succeeded as king, with the couple spending their first night together at St. Augustine's Abbey near Canterbury on June 13, 1625. As a Roman Catholic, Henrietta Maria was unable to participate in the Church of England ceremony on February 2, 1626, when Charles was crowned in Westminster Abbey. A suggestion she be crowned by Daniel de la Mothe Houdencourt, the Bishop of Mende who accompanied her to England, was unacceptable, although she was allowed to watch her husband's coronation at a discreet distance. This went down badly with the London crowds, while England's pro-French policy gave way rapidly to a policy of supporting French Huguenot uprisings, and then a disengagement from European politics as internal problems grew. After an initially difficult period, she and Charles formed a close partnership and were devoted to each other, but Henrietta Maria never fully assimilated into English society. She did not speak English before her marriage, and as late as the 1640s had difficulty writing or speaking the language. Combined with her Catholicism, this made her unpopular among English contemporaries who feared papist subversion and conspiracies such as the Gunpowder Plot. Henrietta Maria has been criticized as being an intrinsically apolitical, undereducated and frivolous figure during the 1630s. Others have suggested that she exercised a degree of personal power through a combination of her piety, her femininity, and her sponsorship of the arts. Henrietta Maria's marriage to Charles did not begin well, and his ejection of her French staff did not improve it. Initially, their relationship was frigid and argumentative, and Henrietta Maria took an immediate dislike to the Duke of Buckingham, the king's favorite. One of Henrietta Maria's closest companions in the early days of her marriage was Lucy Hay, wife of James Hay, who helped negotiate the marriage and who was now a gentleman of the bedchamber to Charles. Lucy was a staunch Protestant, a noted beauty, and a strong personality. Many contemporaries believed her to be a mistress to Buckingham, rumors which Henrietta Maria would have been aware of, and it has been argued that Lucy was attempting to control the new queen on his behalf. Nonetheless, by the summer of 1628 the two were extremely close friends, with Hay one of the Queen's ladies-in-waiting. In August 1628, Buckingham was assassinated, leaving a gap in the royal court. Henrietta Maria's relationship with her husband promptly began to improve, and the two forged deep bonds of love and affection, marked by various jokes played by Henrietta Maria on Charles. Henrietta Maria became pregnant for the first time in 1628 but lost her first child shortly after birth in 1629, following a very difficult labor. In 1630, the future Charles II was born successfully, however, following another complicated childbirth aided by the noted physician Theodore de Mayerne. By now, Henrietta Maria had effectively taken over Buckingham's role as Charles's closest friend and advisor. Despite the ejection of the French staff in 1626, Charles's court was heavily influenced by French society. French was usually used in preference to English, being considered a more polite language. Additionally, Charles would regularly write letters to Henrietta Maria addressed, "Dear Heart." These letters showcased the loving nature of their relationship. For example, on January 11, 1645, Charles wrote, "And dear heart, thou canst not but be confident that there is no danger which I will not hazard, or pains that I will not undergo, to enjoy the happiness of thy company." Henrietta Maria, as her relationship with her husband grew stronger, split with Lucy Hay in 1634. The specific reasons are largely unclear, although the two had had their differences before. Hay was an ardent Protestant, for example, and led a rather more dissolute life than the Queen. Henrietta Maria may also have felt rather overshadowed by the confident and beautiful Hay, and because she now had such a close bond with her husband, such confidants were no longer as necessary. Henrietta Maria returned to England following the Restoration in October 1660 along with her daughter Henrietta. She did not return to much public acclaim. Samuel Pepys counted only 3 small bonfires lit in her honor, and described her as a very little plain old woman, then aged 50, and nothing more in her presence in any respect nor garb than any ordinary woman. She took up residence once more at Somerset House, supported by a generous pension. Henrietta Maria's return was partially prompted by a liaison between her second son, James, Duke of York, and Anne Hyde, the daughter of Edward Hyde, Charles II's chief minister, and was pregnant, and James had proposed marrying her. Henrietta Maria was horrified. She still disliked Edward Hyde, did not approve of the pregnant Anne, and certainly did not want the courtier's daughter to marry her son. However, Charles II agreed, and despite her efforts the couple were married. That same September, Henrietta's third son, Henry Stuart, Duke of Gloucester, died of smallpox in London at age 20. He had accompanied his brother King Charles II to England in May and had participated in the King's triumphal progress through London. More death was to follow. On Christmas Eve, Henrietta's elder daughter Mary also died of smallpox in London, leaving behind a 10-year-old son, the future William III of England. In 1661, Henrietta Maria returned to France and arranged for her youngest daughter, Henrietta, to marry her first cousin, Philippe I, Duke of Orleans, the only brother of Louis XIV. This significantly helped English relations with the French. After her daughter's wedding, Henrietta Maria returned to England in 1662 accompanied by her son Charles II and her nephew Prince Rupert. She had intended to remain in England for the rest of her life, but by 1665 was suffering badly from bronchitis, which she blamed on the damp British weather. Henrietta Maria traveled back to France the same year, taking residence at the Hôtel de la Bassinière, the present Hôtel de Chimay in Paris. In August 1669, she saw the birth of her granddaughter Anne-Marie d'Orleans, and Marie was the maternal grandmother of Louis XV, making Henrietta Maria an ancestor of most of today's European royal families. Shortly afterwards, she died at the Château de Colombes, near Paris, having taken an excessive quantity of opiates as a painkiller on the advice of Louis XIV's doctor, Antoine Vallet. She was buried in the French royal necropolis at the Basilica of Saint Denis, with her heart being placed in a silver casket and buried at her convent in Chaillet. During his 1631 Northwest Passage expedition in the ship Henrietta Maria, Captain Thomas James named the northwest headland of James Bay where it opens into Hudson Bay for her. The U.S. state of Maryland was named in her honor by her husband, Charles I. George Calvert, 1st Baron Baltimore, submitted a draft charter for the colony with the name left blank, suggesting that Charles bestow a name in his own honor. Charles, having already honored himself and several family members in other colonial names, decided to honor his wife. The specific name given in the charter was Terra Mariae, en Lice, Maryland. The English name was preferred over the Latin due in part to the undesired association of Mariae with the Spanish Jesuit Juan de Mariana. Numerous recipes ascribed to Henrietta Maria are reproduced in Kenelm Digby's famous cookbook The Closet of the Eminently Learned Sir Kenelm Digby KT. Opened. A silk and wool mixed cloth made in 1660, named in honor of the Queen, Henrietta Maria. Thanks for watching HerStory channel. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe our channel.